When I post up a P&L, lots of people comment about many different aspects of it. But one of the comments that comes up quite often is, well, it's okay for you, Peter, you've got a big bank. You know, if you're a smaller player, you've got no chance whatsoever. But the truth is actually the complete opposite. It's an absolute myth that you need a big bank when you're sports trading, when you're doing any form of Betfair trading, because in fact, a smaller bank works significantly in your favor. And if you want to learn out why that is, then just watch the rest of this video. So as we start this video, what I want you to do is to look at a P&L. And the reason I want you to look at the P&L is because I'm going to come back to it at the end of this video, and hopefully through all of the information that I've given you, you will fully understand exactly the point that I'm trying to make. So when I bring up this P&L, I'll give you some background to exactly how it was created. It was created on a Monday because Monday is a low impact day for me. I could skip a Monday and not really think much about it over the course of a week, but that's not something I could do on a Saturday. So Monday is a low impact day for me. And what I did on this particular day was I actively traded each market with a fixed stake. So I would trade in and trade out with the same amount of money on every trade, on every single market over the course of the day. And what I want you to do is to guess what that stake was. When you look at the P&L, it isn't anything particularly impressive. I could have cherry picked a really nice day, but this is just like today. I didn't pre-prepare or pick on the day for any particular reason other than it was a Monday. And you can see a scattering of profits and losses and a variety of different things within there. But have a think about what stake you would have required in order to be able to produce this result. Was it £100, 500, 1,000, £10,000, whatever you think? Have a think about it. Pause the video if you feel you want to do that, because we're going to return to this at the end of the video where hopefully you would completely understand all of the points that I'm about to make. So one of the reasons that people say you need a large bank when you're trading is because of the small amount of money that you can make on each individual market, or each individual market move, I should say appropriately. So let's say that we're trading something on Betfair that is at odds of 1.75. So if the price moves in your favor, it's moving 1% at a time. So if you have a £100 stake, then all of a sudden you're just going to get a 1% return on that. You're going to get £1 for the £100 that you have put through the market. And a lot of people sort of freak out when they see something like that. But of course, you're not under any obligation to trade the favour or something at a short price. You could move further down the book and trade something at a bigger price. But then also imagine you're trading something at 198 to 197 and you make that money. You also have to hedge that bet to ensure that you win whatever the result. So you make your £1 profit at 198 and then you hedge your bet, and your total profit that you'll make within that market is pretty much halved. You'll make 50p. So you put £100 in on one side, £100 in on the other, and you end up with 50p. Well, at least that's what most people think trading is all about, or the limitations with some of the trades. You need a large amount of money in order to be able to make a small amount, but that's not actually the case for a number of reasons, as we will discover in a second. But yeah, this is why you get this sort of myth that people sort of say, well, the only way you can make big money is to actually use a absolutely massive stake and or therefore a bank. But the reality is somewhat different. However, when you look at it from that particular perspective, you end up in this sort of mindset that sort of says, well, I'm never going to make serious money because the returns are absolutely tiny considering the amount of money that I have to put through the market. So before I traded on Betfair, I did trade on financials. That was going to be my path to financial freedom. Never did I think that the 6:30 at Kempton would actually be my path to financial freedom when I was trading on financials. And I was an early adopter as well. I'm trying to think back to when, in fact, I actually placed or bought stock in the US stock market via CompuServe. That's how far back I go. And when the internet came around, I was involved and active on all of those trading forums related to internet and online trading at that particular moment in time. So yeah, history goes back some way. But the interesting thing about financials is you have a fixed range of instruments that you can trade. And by instruments, what we mean are things that you trade. So FTSE index, Dow, NASDAQ, stocks, commodities, bonds, options, whatever you fancy, you can actively trade those. But those markets are fixed. They don't change very much. They represent some underlying value. And that is it, really. They don't, if you want to put large amounts of money through those markets, there's only one way that you can really do that. And one is have an absolutely huge bank and use massive trade values through the market. Or perhaps you can buy them on margin and therefore use leverage. In other words, you borrow money to put through the market, something you cannot do in betting markets. Or perhaps you use a CFD, where you can use a contract for difference to leverage your stake through the market. That's how people take small amounts and make it much, much bigger on financials, but that is not open to you on betting markets in any way whatsoever. However, one thing that's unique about betting markets is the sheer number of them and the speed at which they're created and destroyed. If you go into Betangel, you go into Guardian, and you look at the filter list on the left, you'll actually see at the bottom of that the number of markets that you could actively be trading on that particular day. And very often it's about 15,000. So in comparison to financial markets, there are so many different types of markets that you can actively trade. But also one of the big advantages, these markets are created and destroyed very quickly. So if you go back to that P&L that I showed you at the start of this video, is even if I have a small bank, I can trade it on one market, and that is settled and put to use straight away in the next market, and then the next market. So even if I had a bank of, say, £1,000, trading it over the course of 40 markets means that I've effectively leveraged it to a trade value of about £40,000, despite the fact that I actually only have a small amount of money in my account at any one particular moment in time. And that is because there are so many sports markets and they open and close so frequently. So one of the things you learn very quickly is that you don't actually need a massive bank in order to be able to trade a large number of markets. And that is because they're created and destroyed so quickly that you can repeatedly use that stake on each individual market. And in that way, you sort of achieve leverage much, much bigger than you would typically get with financial markets. So another big difference in the way that financials work and sports trading work is instant settlement. Most people are unaware of this because they're not even aware that there is an issue with the way that markets are settled, but it's something that is hugely favorable on sports trading markets, and also it's hugely favorable to your bank as well. But if I went out today and bought a FTSE 100 stock and sold it later in the day, you have this situation where you have a settlement period. So in the UK it's T+2 and in the US it's T+1. And that basically means that if you put money into the market, they will hold on to it until the trade is settled. You don't instantly get that available to use. Now contrast that with when you actively trade on Betfair, because what will happen is we put a lay trade in, we put a back bet in, or vice versa. And the instant that that trade is complete, we have our stake available to reuse again. So all of a sudden we have another sort of leveraging effect on the amount of money that we're choosing to use. So let us say that we have a stake of £1,000 and we actually put it in and out of the market 10 times over the course of that particular market, maybe over 10 minutes, maybe over half an hour, whatever time period you want to choose. We're effectively reusing that £1,000 10 times. We're turning it into £10,000 in total trade value. And the big benefit of this is that if we have a small profit on that, then the next trade that we put through the market is carrying less risk, because ultimately what happens is the profit that we've made on the previous trade diminishes the liability on the next one. So think about it in reality. If we put £1,000 through a market 10 times, we're effectively leveraging it to £10,000. And if we trade 40 markets with that £10,000, all of a sudden we're trading £400,000 over the course of a day. And this is just with a bank of £1,000, or a stake of £1,000, I should say. So yeah, this is significantly different from what you'd find on financials, and it makes trading on Betfair a huge benefit if you're going to actively have a small bank, because you can just recycle it not only through multiple markets, but you can recycle it in those markets multiple times as well, and it doesn't deplete your bank. The only thing that gets carried forward is your profit or loss. It's an absolutely massive benefit when you're trading on Betfair, especially if you have a small bank. So there's a big advantage to being able to trade with small stakes in sports trading markets, and that is that you can recycle them through multiple markets multiple times, and that leverages your stake absolutely hugely without having to borrow money or do anything sort of weird. You can't do that in financials. You can do it in sports trading markets. But there's a funny thing that happens here as well, and that is that you get absolutely huge returns on stake and on your bank when you're doing this. But the issue that you face is if you start to up your stakes, you end up influencing the market, whether it be stopping the odds from reaching a certain point or stopping the flow of activity within the market. That can actually negatively influence the outcome of the trade. So having a bigger bank actually starts to work against you, whereas having a small bank means you can move around the market, trade in and out without anybody ever noticing. And of course, you can take advantage of this leverage effect in order to be able to put large amounts of money through the market without actually having a large amount of money. And, you can have a relatively small stake and repeat that through the market, but you may need a slightly bigger bank, because if you open a trade by laying sort of, a certain amount of money at sixes, then obviously you're going to have to have enough money in your account to be able to do that. So you're always going to need a bigger bank than your stake, but nonetheless, they could both be relatively small and still have this massive leveraging effect. So at this point, let's return to the start of the video and have a look at that P&L. And you can see on this particular day, I traded around 30 or so markets, and you can see the result that I produced over those markets. So what stake do you think that I actually used on each of these trades? Because we look at the particular result, it's not that particularly big, but in fact, the stake that I used wasn't particularly big either. It was just £10 per trade. Now, a lot of you will look at that and sort of go, oh my God, you've earned multiples of that £10 over the course of the day. And in fact, you could use a much bigger stake than £10 and have no influence over the market whatsoever. But of course, you've got to remember that I'm quite skilled at this. I've been doing it for a large number of years. So my ability to be able to do this is quite high. I wouldn't expect you to be able to repeat that feat. But nonetheless, the reason for doing those trades and for doing this video is to show you that you don't need a big bank in order to produce decent results.